Hello, everyone. I don't know if, Cornelia, can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Apparently, so I've joined the class. As you can see, your PowerPoint is on the screen right now. So I added it in for you. Like I said in the email that I just sent to you, I had to convert it to a PDF that's a smaller size to fit in there. But also, believe it or not, I have another student here for you. Hopefully we can get that student to join within the next half hour or so. So, oh my God, it's just been a really stressful day. And so I just have to create the account, get it activated. Hopefully that'll be within the next half hour or so, and we'll get them. We'll get that new student on the roll with us, okay? And of course, that student can also view the recording later on as well. Anyway, so, but anyway, I'll leave it to you. I'm just going to put myself on mute. If you need me to come up, I'll come up. But in the meantime, I'll get busy to create this other account. And hopefully maybe I'll have some input on some questions or whatever, or and have some fun. Okay.
We will have fun. Thanks, Leonard, for all your help.
Okay. Yeah, no worries at all.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. So I want to use this opportunity to welcome you all into the class and congratulate to all of you in choosing this course and joining us. So a couple of things that I would like to highlight from emails that I have received is the time. So please note that the time is 6:30 local time for anyone in Toronto area. But I understand that there is some communication sent based on the time zone of the college, which is in Alberta. So just be cognizant of that all our courses are starting at 6:30 Toronto time. And then for the Saturday classes, they will be at 10:30. All right, so are you guys ready for adult education class?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. All right. So what we're going to be learning through is, can I just ask everyone to mute themselves?
Come out the door, please.
Sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so it just makes less of the background noise for us and we can all clearly hear. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, by all means, interrupt me. We can stop and discuss what's of interest, but as we're going through, we will have some discussion time as well. All right. So we will be learning today about the educational principles for adult learners. So you guys are all adults. You know that we are all learning in a different way in comparison to the way we learned in school when we were youngsters. And anyone that has children or grandchildren, you know that they're learning a little bit in a different way. Hold on just a second. Suganda is saying she can't connect to audio video. You just respond to her, please. Okay, so while Suganda is trying to connect and come back with us. I apologize for that. I will continue. So as I was saying, it's going to be a little bit different from what we are used to teach and learn in youth versus the adult. So we will be going through some lesson planning and planning to how to address certain topics that are of interest of our target audience. Also identifying what is appropriate content, and later on we will be learning also how to apply these principles. So a couple of other topics that we will be addressing is the environments that we will be using to teach, and the characteristics of good teachers, and then finally the evaluation of the class. So, okay. We have more people with challenges with connections. Okay. All right. So the next step is going to be just a little bit of what you should be getting out of this class today. So again, we will be explaining your adult education. And Simi, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. And more or less of the same thing. This is a line that is actually being delivered to us from IPAC Canada. These are the expectations that you would be leaving the class today with this particular knowledge. So explaining the principles of adult education and a broad range of instructional strategies, address coaching and mentoring and behavior change. So I think this is critical to recognize that when we are teaching in a professional environment, we are doing more of a coaching and mentoring than actual in classroom actual presentation and teachings. Sorry, I'm just monitoring here all our students that are having difficulties with logging in. All right, so I apologize for that to all of you. So I'm going to ask
sorry,
you.
Cornelia,
Yeah,
just
hi,
before
Anna.
you start again, so sorry for the interruption.
No problem.
So for you guys that are having difficulties, you can call our main line, ask for me. The main line number, I just posted it on the chat there. It's 403-457-6400. Ask for me, and I'll see if I can help you guys over the phone. I'll do my best anyway. Otherwise, it's not the end of the world either. You can always look at the presentation, so you can re-log in and then view the presentation, or you can just text in as well. So use the whatchamacallit, the messaging service as well. Okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Thanks, Leonard. All right. So while we are trying to get the rest of the class online, I will continue. Hopefully we will get everyone back on and everyone can join us and hear us. I really apologize for this. But back to our class. And so what it is with regards to adult education and how are we teaching as adults is, as I said, more of a sharing your knowledge. So when you are in a situation where you're working with your colleagues, with your equals, you're sharing more of an expertise with you. And within infection control program, I would say that is a critical piece that we carry as practitioners, the ability and the privilege to teach. So the thing is, in a sense, when you're looking at your colleagues and the group you are encountering in day-to-day, they're all experts within their own fields, and they have a certain resources and certain expertise. However, when it comes to infection control, we are the ones that are connecting their knowledge with the IPAC piece. So we don't really do in-depth education, rarely, but it's mostly is connecting and retraining in a way people think and just kind of opening those doors into their already present knowledge. There are small gaps that we will be addressing through our course of careers, but generally speaking, they already know quite a lot. It's just putting it in a perspective of infection control. All right. So with the adult education, what the basic goal of our healthcare is to improve the job skills. So basically, the way I would explain it to you would be strengthening your teams, your partners in your units, in your facilities. It's no benefit to any one of us if we hold information and not share it. Once you create the environment where your colleagues can trust you and they're coming in for the questions, you are in that sweet spot where that exchange of information is flowing. In a sense, what that means, they will tell you with their questions where the gap is, and you will be able to respond to that by providing the feedback to them and providing information that they're looking for. So the training in the workplace facilities, in the healthcare facilities such as hospitals or long-term care facilities or retirement homes are kind of interesting. They're not your typical educational settings where you have the luxury of time to put everyone into a room and talk to them for an hour or two. Generally speaking, it's usually on the fly. You're answering a lot of questions as you're working through your day, but also it's sometimes you will find yourself in situations that the facility is actually asking you to provide certain trainings because it is either mandated or there is some pressure points that the facility is going through. So one of the examples I would think is your hand hygiene programs, that is ministry mandated program, and there is an expectation that we as IPAC are delivering the training and courses in terms of the actual hand hygiene practices, but also with regards to hand hygiene audits. So then we are going into your learning and retention. So how does one learn as an adult? Is we'll get a little bit later more into detail. How does this actual process happen with adults versus youth? That I think is critical when we are teaching, that us as providers of information keep that in mind, that there is a different process that occurs in adults. For example, would be the best thing is to provide to a recipient of your information is ability to train themselves. So if you can create an environment where you will have your colleagues listen to you, but also train someone else and follow immediately with the same set of information, that's how the information retains the longest, the best. So as I said, it can be driven by different needs of the facility. So it could be something that is also tied to financial goals. So sometimes in some situations you will find that the reduction of healthcare associated infections may be tied to some of the bonuses of the VPs and CEOs, and then that is their goal to reduce the numbers, and you'll become a part of that training, delivering the training to the frontline staff in terms of management and how do we reduce this numbers, but also it's tied back to financial benefits. It also can be something that, as I said, could be mandated by the ministries, could be different benchmarking within the regions that you're looking into comparison when you're submitting your reports to ministries. Here in Ontario, we have Quality Ontario, where we are reporting the numbers of hospital-acquired infections in terms of C. diff, MRSA, and VRE. Those would be your bloodstream infections for MRSA and VRE, and C. diff would be your C. difficile infection. So we are looking at how do we benchmark with regards to these infections, how do we compare it to our neighbor hospitals or similar hospitals in size and type of services that these hospitals do provide. All right. Am I still having everyone here following? I mean, then I didn't lose anyone sleeping or dozing off? Okay, good, thank you. All right, that's great. Okay, so then we will continue with. All right, thank you for muting yourself. There you go. No, we're all good, thank you. So when you're delivering your adult education, before you get to a point that you're delivering the education, whether that's formal or informal, you need to make and do something that is called a needs assessment. So there's different ways of obtaining that information. Sometimes it's quite challenging to gauge, especially if you're a new hire or new in the role, it's challenging to gauge where is the knowledge gap in your population. So you can do something like surveys or have, again, some sort of a feedback from the team. Can be just a very informal discussion in terms of what are their interests, what they would like to learn about any infection control measures from you. But there is also a good indicator if you're seeing from the audits that are happening on your unit, such as hand hygiene audits or PPE audits, or even when you're looking into your infection rates. If you're looking into the colonization with MRSA or VRE, if you're seeing a spike in certain numbers, that would be a good indicator for you to know where to look. So if you think of, for example, MRSA, we know it is a skin contaminant and generally travels on hands of the healthcare providers. So if your hand hygiene rates would say, oh, we are in about 95% compliance, and you are having continuous transmission of MRSA on your unit, something is not aligned. So I would say either your audit is not doing so well and not capturing the true picture, or alternatively could be that there is some other issues going on, but that would be something to look at. And in that case, I would say if you see these numbers that are going high up, like for MRSA or VRE, which we know is more of an environmental contaminant and travels on equipment. So that would be something for you to take a step back and look, observe how are these cleaning practices actually happening in real life versus what are your colleagues telling you that they're doing. So you would be looking at, okay, so there is maybe a gap here, maybe they're not properly cleaning, maybe there is not enough of contact time that is provided, and then your education could correlate to your observations. But whenever you are working on your educational plan, you have to think about the outcomes as well, and then what is the end goal of this education? So why are you providing it? We're not providing education just for sake of providing education. You guys are in this particular class with a goal, and your goal is to get your infection control course and to get at the end your CIC certification. So that's the goal for us. So we have to break it down how to get there and use appropriate teaching methodologies to share this knowledge with you. So this can be linked, as I said before, to vision, mission, and values, and usually does revolve around that. I would say with regards to infection control, we never really stray far away from these vision, mission, and values, we're always in line, because when our programs are created, we are always in line with the actual facility that we are serving. Okay. Is there any questions that you guys have to maybe ask, or you would like to bring up? By all means, feel free to do so. I am monitoring the chat on the side, so I apologize for the breaks in here. Okay. So I think I kind of already have covered this slide in a little bit, but what is really critical for us is to make sure that we increase the competence, increase the knowledge. And I'm sure there's a number of different variations of speaking about knowledge being power in any one of us. But truly it takes off your plate in very simple terms, but it takes a lot of your plate in your day-to-day activities if you create your little groups of IPAC supporters. For people who are new to the field and new in the role, I would suggest you will be looking into your colleagues who show some interest into IPAC. Those would be your easiest group to reach out to, but also looking into people that are informal leaders on your units. So that may not be the manager of the unit, but could be someone that the team of your unit really, really likes, and you may reach out to them and just create these connections and relationships that you can tap into, and then create and grow your relationship with, and they can draw from you and distribute that knowledge. I find during COVID, it's been really, really difficult to disseminate information on the units, especially for people that work exclusively weekends or exclusively nights. So you want to find ways to reach and be able to reach to these groups. So having these connections on your units could probably be one of the ways of how do we reach to individuals that work only on certain hours and they're not necessarily in line with us. We will talk about that a little bit more in depth later. So, and then a couple of other things is critical thinking, of course, is what does that mean for us in terms of teaching of IPAC, is finding the problems, identifying the problems, thinking around these problems, and what are the targets, right? So I would say, just for example, so say you have an outbreak on your unit and you have a C. diff outbreak raging on the unit. When you come to teach, it's probably the best idea to teach about that C. diff, and no one will show interest about measles at this point. So thinking about what is pertinent to their interest. So then we are looking into analysis of your teaching too. So we'll get a little bit more into that as well later. And then finally is evaluation. So you can do that by measuring. So it could be quizzes, could be feedback, could be different ways of addressing the evaluation of your teachings. So that is more applicable in situations when you have formal education, when you sit down in a room, you provide them with a time to listen to you, get engaged, provide maybe a quiz at the end, but also asking them to provide you with a feedback with regards to material, whether that was something that they were hoping to hear, was it something that is suitable to their roles, but also is that something that they can apply in their day-to-day work moving forward, okay? So with regards to education and the forms and methodologies of how do we do that, IPAC is no different than any other field. There is few things that we can do. There's oral, written, And then formal and informal. I already touched on formal and informal teachings. So oral, of course, is when you have a presentation, you talk to them. Written education is something that you can actually implement and distribute, something like fact sheets and brochures, and distribute also some of the research materials or documents that are pertinent to your teams. I find with oral presentations, you have a little bit more of control in which way you can shift and change that conversation. In particular, if there is an interest or question, with written is one-way communication from you, and it's whether they're going to read or not, it's up to them. There are some other ways that I have used in the past that written communication would be also written education during, say, we had recently the World Hand Hygiene Day, so we would be prepping our teams for about a week before the Hand Hygiene Day, and then usually in our signatures there is some messaging with regards to hand hygiene, or if we are driving them to any of the booths that we have created, we would send them over there where is more information to them. Also, we have used internal TV systems. So if you have in your hospitals, I'm not sure if this is something that is prevalent in long-term care facilities or retirement homes and smaller facilities. If so, that's great. Often you will find these TV screens in waiting areas or in break rooms that have messaging from the hospital. So this is where you can send some very short messaging with regards to, did you know that if you clean your hands for 15 seconds, it reduces infection rates by so many percent. And anything that you can create in a more did you know, you can utilize that. It's more of a written education. And then, as I said, formal would be when you have a class, you sit down, you invite your group, you present to them information, and then informal is actually something that I prefer, and it's my favorite. I'm most comfortable delivering the informal education is those little quick huddles and when answering questions. And I will tell you, in your job, that is going to be 90% of education you deliver is that informal. And this is where you have to listen to the questions and respond to them. So sometimes staff may be shy in the beginning to ask, but it's also looking for the nuances and what are they asking, and sometimes they're shy to ask in a larger group. So these are the times that you will get the most, I find them the most beneficial and have most impact than any other education that I deliver, is because that's when they are seeking the information. Everyone good? No questions? Okay, I'll move to the next slide. Okay, so what is critical for us when we are teaching? So again, considering that we live in a country that is very, very diverse, I think it is critical that we show respect to all of our colleagues and recognize that we may not have the same cultural background, same religious background, we're not of same age and gender. So showing respect to that. Also knowing how certain age categories may perceive information or may process information, it also may be beneficial. So if you're looking, I will say this. So for example, nurses are extremely highly skilled in what they do. They do often struggle with technology, and once you start pushing any sorts of webinars to them, you may expect that there's going to be a little bit of an uphill for you to create an environment that everyone can participate. The other thing is, at work, not everybody has access to computers. Hi, Rosemary.
Oh, hi. I was trying for a while to log in. Sorry.
No, you're good. Thanks for coming. Okay. So, and again, as I said, also organizational culture. So depending on what is the dynamic and how does that hospital breed and or long-term care facility, you will find, in my experience, I was working on two different units. It's the same manager, same CPL, the educator. I'm the same. However, the cultures just between the two doors are significantly different. And recognizing these cultures and how one unit works versus the other will help you provide that education and get where you need to be. Okay? So with adult learners like you are, you will see that you're very self-directed. So you can find all the information, of course. You can actually go and look for information that you need and that is more fitting for your end goal. Also, it does come and it is influenced by life experiences and the previous knowledge. So if you have someone who is coming from, I don't know, public health background versus a nursing background, I can speak from my own experience. I have had quite a challenge grasping at the beginning at some of these clinical parts of IPAC because being a public health inspector, that's not a skill set that I possess. So recognizing that you may have staff from different walks of life and different educational backgrounds, so you may have something like PSWs and nurses and housekeeping. So how do we recognize the differences and how do we tailor our messaging to them so that's applicable to them, but it's also easy for them to understand. So with adults, we're always goal-oriented. So I would say if I'm interested today to hear about taxes, I will be sitting in that room and listening about the taxes. But I'm not really a person who likes the numbers, so it's really hard to get me to listen to that. So what I'm trying to say here is if my goal is to get to the CIC course, adult education may not be my cup of tea, but I will be sitting tonight here and listening to this because it's a step closer to get my my CIC certification. So as I said, it has to be relevant. So information, if you remember, I mentioned earlier, if you have a C. diff outbreak on the unit, that's the time you are teaching about C. diff. We are not teaching at this point about measles. You could, but there is no interest in that. They're interested now. They're in a pickle. They want to get really quickly out. This is now the time when they're really, really interested to hear what you have to say all about the C. diff, how it's spread, how we're cleaning these surfaces. So this is when you teach this particular topic. And as I said, always, always, always show respect. Just like you come to work, you want to be respected, everybody else does. And this will actually propel you further and also be respected. It's a two-way line, I would say. So if you respect them, they will respect you. And I know sometimes we think in IPAC role, we have to put a foot down, but that also can be done in a respectful way. So always be cognizant about your surroundings, be aware of your body language, of your tone, and make sure that you show that. Okay, so this is a very, very heavy slide. It's just a chart that I wanted to share with you, but I'm not going to be going through this in a great detail, but it's breaking it down to what are the conditions of adult education and then the principles of teaching. Basically it tells you in a sense what we as ICPs need to do in our teachings and how do we set ourselves up in this life of teaching that we do. So as I said, recognize always what is the interest of your audience, help them identify the gaps. And I mentioned this before. You can do that by having simple conversation and filling in as you go, or you can do a survey, send out a wide survey. I find they don't always respond the best. It's whatever comes to their mind. Really, it's very few people will actually hit that and recognize where are they short. And I think the problem is, as with all of us, we often don't know what we don't know. So I think when you ask a group, okay, so what would you like me to teach to you? They will say something that is already familiar or close to them, but they actually may not even recognize where the gap is. So for us as educators, it's critical that we are able to assess and find the gaps and fill in and help them close those gaps so they're growing into stronger teams with you. So when you're looking into these environments, we'll be mentioning that later on. It's really difficult for IPAC to create the environment where we can have a room that is perfectly lighted and has a perfect temperature. I know all of you who are in the settings of either hospitals or long-term care facilities or retirement homes. It's a real challenge finding rooms that we can bring the people. And then the other issue for us is, again, the timing. So you will end up doing a lot of huddles, a lot of these impromptu teachings, but there is going to be an opportunity for you also to do that formal teachings and where you will be setting up the room. So I will be touching on that as well. But it's bottom line out of what I want you to take out of this is that it's critical for you to build the relationships with the frontline staff, with the management, with your own team, and use that to propel you and be your baseline in moving forward. So Vernet here has a question. How do we teach adult learners who are stuck in their ways and they don't like changes? Okay, so that's a good question. I will be discussing this a little bit more later on. But I think what is critical for us to recognize is why are they stuck in a certain way? So is it lack of understanding? Most people are not stuck in their way because they want to harm anyone. So say, for example, let's use hand hygiene and glove use, right? So if you're seeing somebody who every time you come to the unit and every time you open the door and you step foot on that unit, you see the same person wearing the gloves, and you have had that conversation and explained to them, this is how the basic principles of hand hygiene are. We don't use gloves. Gloves are single use, so you've done all of that, and they're still not following. So the question then to ask yourself is, why are they not responding, right? So you've done your kind of base layer, provided that minimal information to them. Not everyone will respond to that, and I would say most people do not respond to that, but at least we have a starting point where we say, okay, so we provided this information, so now we can build and build and build on top of that. Just saying something is never going to be enough. So I would say asking, why is this person stuck in their ways? Usually there is a certain amount of fear that does come with this behavior. Usually they're afraid that they're going to get something, they're going to get sick, or they don't trust the hand hygiene is sufficient to remove the microorganisms from their skin, or they are just, that's how they were trained in the past, and this is now maybe something new that's coming to them. So those are different ways to approach that problem. So you may want have a conversation with them and also observe. Sometimes we catch a part of a scenario. So I would say make sure you give yourself enough time to observe an event, that you can be very objective in what you've seen, And then from there on, you can have a conversation. The way I carry these conversations with people, I usually start with, okay, so I have a question for you. You know who I am. Usually these conversations happen with people that know who I am, but if they don't, always make sure you introduce yourself if it's a new face. So you can tell them, so I'm Cornelia, I'm from IPAC. You know what we do. If you were in my role and you saw yourself, would you do something differently? Would anything be a red flag for you that you think I am concerned just observing this event? So usually they say, oh no, I forgot to take my gloves off, or they actually truly believe that this is the right way to do. And then this is your opportunity to educate and provide the right information. But in most instances, people truly forget. And then you just have to work with them. If there is a fear and they told you, I'm afraid, or then you have to provide them with more evidence to why is this better. So why is it worse wearing a set of gloves from room to room to room versus cleaning your hands? So I hope that kind of helps you out a little bit. But as I said, we will get a little bit more into that as we progress through the class. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So I think also moving forward with the framework, what I think is, how do you make yourself relevant? And how do you make yourself more human? I found every time I was touched by an event on the unit, whether we had a hospital-acquired case of something or we had a loss of life, I know that I do get emotional, and it shows on me that, and I feel that does translate. I'm not saying have waterworks and cry, but just show your human side when you're talking to your colleagues. Show them that there's a reason why you care. And most of us came into field because we truly care about the infection control, and we would like to make the differences and shape our colleagues to help them reduce the number of infections and reduce the number of hospital-acquired cases and help them for themselves to be safe, but also keep our patients safe. So if you show that this is your passion, they will respond to that for sure, 100%. Everyone responds to that. And then, as I said, always make sure you involve your audience. So ask them questions, or if you are doing any activities, involve them. If you're doing any long-term plannings, if you have infection control weeks, I know last 2 years have been really difficult for any of the fun events for us, but there is a possibility to create events outside of COVID world where we do have an opportunity to teach through fun. So I will tell you a little bit about that as well. But also, I think it shows that you care as well, okay? So I'm just going to move to the next slide. Is there any questions here? Okay. So the 3 types of learning. So now we are getting in a little bit of that technical piece, and it's more of a dry part, but it's critical that we go through this because it is on your CIC exam. They're asking in tests about the Bloom's taxonomy and the types of learning. So I will try translating into more practical events for you so you can connect these a little bit of dry topics with events that actually happen in real life, and I hope that works for you. Okay, so it's the types of learning that Bloom has broken down. Bloom was a psychologist who broke down the learning practices. So it's cognitive, which is your knowledge, and then it's your affective part of learning is your growth in feelings and emotional areas where you recognize your attitudes and you recognize yourself. And then there's the psychomotor skills, which is, I think, more in relation to, say, if you're showing someone how to clean their hands versus telling them how to clean their hands, how do you develop the skill versus telling them how to. And I find, especially with something that is so intrinsic to us and we are taught from early age how to clean hands, telling someone that you need to teach them how to clean their hands always causes some raised eyebrows. And we'll get through that as well. Okay. So Benjamin Bloom, he developed this taxonomy that's shown as a pyramid. That's how it's shown across any book I ever came across or any website. That's how they're showing it. But it's broken down into the kind of low levels and high levels of this taxonomy and how do you break down. So the first thing is evaluation. And usually we do evaluate the situation, then we synthesize the information and analyze. So those are your highest levels. And then your lower levels is knowledge and comprehension and application. So when you're looking into the knowledge, so it's what is your common knowledge. So you know, for example, that, say, alcohol-based hand rubs contain alcohol, so that's the knowledge that you have. If you're going to think about something that is widely known and more applicable, is everybody knows that lemon is yellow and it's acid and it's bitter, and everybody knows that. So that's just the knowledge. There's nothing to it. But when it comes to comprehension, is how do you comprehend that knowledge, and what is that you actually can do with that knowledge to apply. So those are kind of like three tiers of the information that we have. And then when you start analyzing and synthesizing this information, those are your highest level of observing an information. So you would be analyzing, okay, so if there is alcohol in the hand sanitizer, how much alcohol do I need to kill the microorganisms? So what is the World Health Organization telling us? What is Public Health Ontario telling us? So anything that is below 72 is not good enough. So you're looking into the information that's provided to you. You're analyzing the, say, the research papers, the published information. Why is this important? Then how do you implement that? So you're going to be looking for suppliers that provide this alcohol-based hand rub with this percentage and start implementing that in real life and then evaluating that information. So it's a little bit of a combination there. I hope you will get there and understand what I'm saying. So this Bloom's taxonomy, again, this is, as an IPAC practitioner, you will never show this to any of your frontline staff, but it's important for you to know for your certification purposes. So get very comfortable about the actual pyramids and how is this being listed and what are the steps or what are the levels rather of this taxonomy. And so what is important to know here, in 2001, this taxonomy was revised, and you will see that there is a little bit different. So there are some changes in terms of verbs and nouns and how application to apply, comprehension to understand, knowledge to remember. So it's just a little bit of a different terminology, but more or less of the same idea behind. Besides that, when you're looking in the top two, where the with Lauren Anderson, he actually has changed the levels of evaluation because he thought you cannot evaluate something before you create something. There is that a bit of a change. So that's all there is with that regards. So when you're looking into further continuation of the Bloom's taxonomy, it's broken down into two, I would say, two columns in this table in particular. So it's learning behaviors and then what are your goals of your learning process. So if you're looking back into the actual pyramid, you will see they exactly translate here in the same in the same order. So remembering is what your learner can remember. So this is when I said, if you think about hand hygiene, so if you tell them how to do hand hygiene, and it's because hand hygiene is broken down into so many steps, how many of them they will remember, and in particular if you bring in your glove use. So I find that's where kind of they start getting tripped remembering how do they remember the information that you shared. Once you get to a point that they do understand, so if you're teaching someone the hand hygiene and then you insert why you're replacing the gloves, they will understand the need to replace the gloves. So you can still do the education, verbal, oral education in this instance. But once you get them to actually go on the unit and they do clean hands in front of you and put the gloves on, this is when you see how they're applying their knowledge. And this is where you see how well do they actually remember what you taught, or sometimes people don't understand from the beginning of your education, but it's also what remains after a few days or a few hours. A lot of things do change in the way we memorize things. All right, and then so the next step is analyzing. This is part when you're looking at how are they performing, but you're also at the same time analyzing and evaluating how did you do your education. And this is a perfect opportunity for you as an educator to pause and look back and say, okay, maybe I didn't really do this part so great, and maybe I can improve on delivery of this information so they can understand better. And so with evaluation, next thing is it's understanding how this process is actually coming to an end at this point. So they're understanding how the process of hand hygiene or donning and doffing gloves is taking place, and at this point you actually can have a discussion with them. So and ask them, okay, so why did you do it this way? Why you decided to not take off the gloves, or why did you take it this way or not? And you can hear from them also why did they decided to go a certain way. So this is again an opportunity for you to take a note and see whether it is what you actually wanted to achieve or not. Again, understanding what's the purpose and what's the end goal of the training. And so when you're creating with your teams, with your frontline, you can always create a product or a point of view. So what that would be, you can, using this technology, using this experience, or the methodology probably would be the best way to explain, is you can use that now, that one person that you trained, to continue and train the rest of the people. Okay. Do you guys have any questions with regards to this Bloom's taxonomy? Okay, so with regards to active learning, that still falls under this Bloom's taxonomy umbrella. So when you're looking into the adults, you're looking into different ways of delivering information. So I would say if I was to pick the dullest and most boring presentation way, it would be exactly what I'm doing right now. I don't know if you're hearing me. I don't know if you're if you're responding to, thank you, Sue, for responding. I don't know how is this actually information being received on the other side. The best is if you can, the best is if you can engage your people. Thank you so much for responding. If you can get them into any sort of discussion, any sort of simulation or guided design, small group problem solving is when I would give you, say, a study to review, and then you can use your own knowledge to say, oh, this is what I've learned so far. So I would say, for example, I will tell you what, okay, so 24-year-old female presents in ER with fever, shortness of breath, cough and chest pain, and your job is to tell me back in terms, break it down to what do you think it is, how do you protect the rest of the patients in ER, and how do you protect the staff in there. So I don't give you much of information. I give you more of kind of guidelines, and then you work with them. So that would be how do you work together in a small group. Usually those groups are about 5 to 6 people. Quizzes, you guys know, I just give you a bunch of questions and you go through ABCs. Games I find are really fun, and I use games quite a bit. And one thing for the games is that it always comes with a reward. I always like to give something after the game, so my participants feel like they got something. It's never anything big. I've been giving buttons, Tim Hortons cards, again, nothing too excessive, and then role playing is another form. Okay, I have a bunch of answers. Okay. Yes, Olivia, you're right. Retention is struggle, and you're absolutely right. Through the pandemic, I found every day we were inundated with information coming at us as practitioners, and then our job is to, first of all, understand. You need to understand what is coming, what kind of information is coming at us, and then kind of digest that and go to your frontline staff and share with them. And you're right, once you get to do that once or twice, they're overloaded. And with the information, in particular, pandemic is not something that we have known before. It's something that is new. It's a novel virus. We are learning every day new information, and new information is being downloaded to us. So every time you're meeting with your group, every time you're telling them new piece of information, and they just get overwhelmed. So at some point you have to stop oversharing, because it's no benefit to anyone. So I think what is really important to recognize what is really pertinent to them, and as long as they're asking, you keep delivering. But at the point when you see that they're just fatigued from the information, they don't know anymore what's right, what's wrong, you just give them a break and continue. You continue with your job and you're there for them, but at some point people just get completely drained. And education that we deliver to them, it is critical to provide care to their patients and residents. However, if we overwhelm them, and there is other components that are coming with pandemic in particular, is the fear of unknown, the information that is coming from uncontrolled sources. So there's a lot of information on Facebook, on a lot of information that is coming on all sorts of social media, misinformation. So we have to be really, really good to generate information for them and deliver in right time. So let's see what is Anika. I think Anika likes to be called Monica. I'll just verify that with her. Kahoot is a great quiz generator, she says. Oh, yes, you're right. Yes. All right, so are you guys good? Do you need a break, a washroom break, or a 5-minute break to drink some water, eat something? No, Leonard is telling us something. Okay. All right. I'll continue, and then if you guys need a break, just let me know. Oh, thanks, Leonard.
So yeah, like I was saying in my, in my text there, that's rather long. A lot of the times, like for example, when I teach my students, a certain concept, I'll make up a story about it to give a different perspective about it, right? And a lot of the times, I use my students' names. So, for example, to explain like the concept of subdural hematoma, I'll go, oh, okay, well, Amandeep, she, got really angry and went up to Cornelia and whacked her with a frying pan, right? So, at first, you're going to have that bruising, and that's from, the trauma from the frying pan. And also, it can even explain a little bit more getting into, let's say, forensics. So that first whack is for free, right? You're not going to break any bones or something like that. And but the success of whack, well, of course, that's going to, damage bone tissue now. And now, it's going to possibly rupture a blood vessel, right? So and so I give these examples, so I get my students laughing. And I don't know if Cornelia mentioned this or not, because I was trying to help people while trying to connect to their audio and that. But yeah, so there, Amandeep, the LOLs, so I get that. Now, you guys, let's play sort of a Price is Right kind of thing. So while Cornelia is doing her lectures and that, the best case scenario, how much percentage-wise do you guys think that you'll actually take away with you and actually remember from that lecture? How much do you think you'll actually remember? So there's a washer and dryer here. Let's make our bids. Is it okay, Sue Ian says 30, Crystal 50. Any other guesses? Without going over, there's an LG washer and dryer at stake here. Okay, so I see 40s, 90s, 60s, 60. Okay, $1. Okay. So, Anika, you think someone's overbid it, huh? Okay. Well, yeah, someone did overbid here. And really, at best case scenario, we take away about 30%, okay? And I know this because I've got a background in psychology and that. So, we have to find unique ways to learn, right? And we find unique ways to teach as well. And making them the lesson plan fun, right? Using games and incorporating multimedia because people love eye candy, right? They'll remember more, right? And probably Cornelia will get into this a little bit too, is that each person is a different kind of learner too, okay? And we have people where they're great with textbooks. They can read a textbook, and so they're a learner that way. There's other learners where they're more the kinetic learner, where they have to do it themselves through trial and error, then they learn it, okay? Other people, here's the famous saying, if you write it, you own it. So a lot of people, they take all these notes and everything, and almost like a journaling, and they remember that way. Me, believe it or not, when I was growing up as a kid, this is going to shock you guys, considering my background and everything. I was actually special needs. So I actually had quite a profound learning disability, right? And so for one, I'm dyslexic, very dyslexic. For me, it affects both the written and the spoken word. Another thing is I'm also considered on being on the autism spectrum disorder as well. So if I ever talk in class, I have this compulsion to talk about trivial things too. It's just one of my compulsions. But with all that in mind, I have a certain kind of eidetic memory. And so if I see it happen, something happen, and I remember it. So I'm what they refer to as a visual learner. So I have to actually see something in action, and then I learn it better that way. Okay? Cornelia, sorry about that.
No, we do welcome a little bit of dynamic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so to Leonard's point, there's different ways of learning, and I have put on screen here for you an event. So I mentioned this before. It's Infection Control Week. It comes in October for all infection control practitioners, and different facilities celebrate differently. I was actually in a facility where we would make our IPAC week last a week and get great prices, give great prices, have booked our boardroom for an entire week and had all sorts of vendors come in. Our public health companions and partners in crime would come. Anyone from our facility that we do work closely with, like occupational health, pharmacy, lab, food services, environmental services. So we invite them, and everyone has their own little booth there, and as you're coming through, you're visiting each one of these. And all of them bring a little bit of visual information with them. And you will see posters, they can have brochures, some have videos, others have actual pieces of equipment, some your UV cleaning equipment. They bring the actual Trudy out or a Xanax. Clorox brings a lot of their product. And a lot of people like to have the conversation with them, and it's a different voice also, and this is a different opportunity for you to tap into that expertise and use them to carry your message further. So it gives a little bit of more different voice to the same message, but at the same time it's fun because it is an IPAC week. We celebrate it. There's always prizes at the end. There's always prizes throughout the event. So we would have the passports, and you go and visit so many booths, you get so many stamps. At the end of the day, you are participating for the big draw. We've done also film festivals. We've done all different sorts of things. I'm going to show you also other ways of teaching. So I already mentioned before the hand hygiene. So one thing is how do we clean hands? I can break it down. You wet your hand, you put soap on, you rub for 15 seconds, get between the webs of your hand. Don't forget the cuticles, don't forget the nails, don't forget your wrists and thumbs. Kids always forget their thumbs, so do adults. But when you show them is a different thing. And then when you ask them all to participate in the hand hygiene and going through the same scenario, you see how that actually has a different impact on retention. Seeing is believing, I call this slide. What we also have done in the past is bring out Petri dishes. So we would work with our lab, and they would provide us with Petri dishes, and we would plant them for collection of air samples from around the hospital. We also did hand hygiene. So we would come around the unit and ask the nurses and PSWs and housekeeping to put a hand on a Petri dish before the hand hygiene, and then ask them to perform hand hygiene, and then put the hand on a second Petri dish. And then we take that back to the lab. The lab would incubate it for us and grow. And then we would go down, take pictures, and distribute this to everyone to see. So those are events that have a lot of impact because you actually see how something has changed from something that you can't see. Hand hygiene and microbes are always difficult to imagine. So if you actually can make it visual, that becomes a little bit more relevant and easy to understand and definitely comprehend. In the right corner here, you see the UV light, and this was one of my takes that I've done with a team of my colleagues. So in the morning I came in and I came just after the shift change. So I waited for them to change the shift. And what's typical for all the frontline staff is as soon as they take over the possession of their computer on wheels, they clean it. So I came around and sprayed the UV powder. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the glow germ. I don't have any stake in a product. Yes, yes, Anika, you're right. So what I did, I just sprinkled the powder across the unit, put it into the keyboards, on the doorknobs, went into the clean utility room and moved around. And then there's areas that I definitely did not want to spread any of that powder. And by the end of the day, the powder was everywhere on the unit. And it just showed that we are not actually doing so great with cleaning our hands and cleaning the equipment. The secret is that it's really difficult to remove the powder, truly. Even the best is to wash hands with soap and water. So if they actually use more of this hand sanitizer, it will not necessarily remove that. But it does show for a good visual. So this lady, she was touched on her shoulder by one of her colleagues, and you can see in the corner there is a fingerprint from somebody who touched her. Yeah, so let me just grab it for you. I'll show you. I have it myself here. I do have, this is, I don't know if you can see it. So it's just a little of a UV light. Nothing too exciting, but it does show, and it's a great, welcome back, Vernet. So yeah, it's a good visual, and it's a good learning tool to show when you, yes. And if you attend any of the IPAC conferences, often you can get them. People are gifting them from one or the other facility or the companies that are presenting at the conferences. So if you have an opportunity, yeah, it's not that expensive either, but you know. All right, so then I'm going to show you a next material development slide that speaks about how do you develop materials. So in this case, what you are looking at is a PowerPoint presentation, but there is different materials that you can develop. You can do brochures, you can do any sort of interactive materials. Other materials that you can develop are the quizzes. Also, as Leonard mentioned, he likes trivia. You can do trivia games. So anything that you can bring them in that they're having fun is the best way to teach. So if you can create any sort of game that they're all participating or they're even developing the games. We would have dice games for this IPAC control week. We would do table soccer, and every time they get a goal or they score a goal, they get to ask their opposite team a question, and we are there to help answer these questions, so then they can pick and choose who they want to have from the IPAC team with them, so they can ask more difficult questions because they have us with them. So anything that you can create that would drive that, more of that energy, positive energy and fun while you're oh, Leonard, please. Yeah, I don't think we should be looking into the hotels with the lights. We would never sleep in a hotel again. So when we are developing the materials that we are working with, just make sure they're practical. So sometimes it's really difficult and challenging for some of these materials to be developed. Sometimes you don't have resources. Sometimes you don't have a skill set. But whatever, whatever you're working on, make sure it's something that makes sense and resonates with your group of your students. So when, in the end, how do you verify whether your target group has understood or retained the knowledge is by asking them to replicate is probably the best. But also is another thing to do is when you get into more formal education is to engage their management or maybe supervisors or educators. So those are people who also can help you with delivering of the material, but also making sure that once you've done the training, so to say if you walk the walk, you talk the talk, or the other way around, I always confuse which one comes first, but they can, if you train the staff, they can help you to ensure that they are actually practicing what you trained them. So if you're teaching, if you're providing training to the housekeeping in terms of, say, what is the contact time after you have cleaned to achieve that disinfection, so those are when someone else can actually step in, and simply we can't be everywhere, especially in a facility where this is you're the only one with that role. You can't be stretching yourself and auditing everyone around. So when you are doing your lesson planning, so this is when you have more of that formal education, you always want to start with your learning objective. So what is the goal? Where do you want to go after this lesson is completed? What do you want them to leave with? And then there is also always that hook. So what is that you want them to, how do you grab them to come into to listen to you? So for me, the biggest hook is your CIC exam, so I don't have to worry about anything. No. And also the teaching content. So it must be something, again, that is very, very relevant to the group you're teaching. So you wouldn't be teaching to, say, your housekeeping, you wouldn't teach to them about Lyme infections. You could touch on that with regards to some aspects, but it's definitely not something that you will be sharing that information with the housekeeping staff, or you wouldn't be mixing that information back and forth. And then, of course, the learning activities is anytime you can show them something that they can relate. So I'm going to show you how I teach the PPE, and that was predominantly used before COVID. I'll try not to spill my board, and then I'm going to try to show you. Can you guys see? Oh. I hope you guys had a chance to take a look and see, but it's called PPE pal. And so my pal is made of felt, and he has two eyes, and usually I would use this to ask people using scenarios. So I would put them in a small group, and I would say, okay, so group of 5, so there is your patient who has diarrhea and vomiting, and you are a nurse, you have to go in, what are you wearing? And then they have to dress them. So then they would do the little gown, because vomiting and diarrhea. And then, of course, because vomiting and diarrhea speaks about norovirus, so it would be a droplet contact precaution. So I made a little mask with a visor. So I would put that, well, they would, hopefully, and then the gloves. And then in the end, when we are done with that, I would ask, oh, maybe this is better. I would ask them to justify why did they dress up their little PPE pal in certain way. Oh gosh, Leonard. All right, so those are some of the techniques that I've been using. Other things that I also use is I use these little guys. And no, they're all fuzzy, so not a good thing during an outbreak, or not a good thing to circulate around. But the superbugs, the giant microbes, this is Mr. MRSA, and then this is his brother, the superbug MRSA. So I use them, I bring them around, show them around, anything that will grab people's attention. I do sometimes dress up just because Leonard said so. I do sometimes this as well. It's not, so anything you can do to grab their attention and make them actually have fun while you're teaching, it helps, because if they're relaxed and they see you as somebody who cares to make their learning a little bit lighter, they will respond better to you, okay? So some of my colleagues would say they're not necessarily comfortable with dressing up. I do have an MRSA cape. It will come up eventually. But I just want to show you something. So this is the N95 that I made. And I always tell them that's a floss, but I did not use it. So as I said, this is just the way I function. It is fitting very much with my personality. I am a prankster. I like jokes. If this is not where is your comfort zone, it's not going to work for you. You have to be Sharon. You have to have different ideas and show around. I will show you later on too. But I also bring these guys. So when we talk C. diff predominantly, I don't know if you guys know what am I showing, if you can recognize, but those are different forms of poop. So I usually tell them, I bring these guys out, show them, and what are we looking for in terms of stool and how is it supposed to look like. So people really just have an opportunity to laugh with you. And I think that's where you create these relationships with your audience, and they can learn from you, and they also know that you're not that hard-pressed ICP that has only one mind goal, and then they can't ask you questions. So if they can laugh with you, they will be more comfortable asking you questions. Okay. So with regards to competence, I think what is important to bring up is that you as an ICP are the source of information. And when you're teaching them, teaching your healthcare providers, the frontline staff, how are you transferring that knowledge into practice is what you want them to take away from. So our bread and butter is the microorganisms. And that may sound awful and sound disgusting, but every day, there's not a day in my job that I don't talk diarrhea. Diarrhea is all we talk day in and day out. First thing you ask your people is, does my patient have any new signs and symptoms? Asking them about diarrhea, and then talking about these microorganisms. Once I find the longer I am on the unit and the longer I'm related to the particular team, they already know what I'm asking. They get prepared. Okay, so I'm in deep. I will just respond to you. Yes, I know. I'm a 3-year-old in my soul. Never mind anything else. So I got the giant microbes. There is an actual website. It's called Giant Microbes. But the first time I actually took a dive into a basket in some novelty store in Kingston, and I found a bunch of these little guys. And they were on sale because I think no one else but IPAC would know what these are. So I bought a bunch of for like $1 or $2, and they're truly never that cheap. I don't know anymore. This is E. coli. So this is gift that keeps on giving, herpes. And this is, if you want to guess, Miss Rubella. So yeah, so the website is called Giant Microbes. Again, I'm not promoting any businesses. I'm not promoting any businesses around, so I just like to have things to show and help with teaching. Yes. Oh, Burnett, I love that. So Burnett was doing the MP swab on herself. Perfect, Burnett. I don't think I would ever do that to myself, but you're great. All right, so basically back to what I'm trying to say here is with regards to the competence. So we want to make sure we are able to describe the role of the microorganisms in disease and how are they transmitted in the healthcare. So this is what you're teaching your troops, so to say, demonstrates the standard and transmission-based precautions. And sorry, I'm distracted by the chat that's happening on the side here. And then also you want to make sure you are comfortable enough with the material. You can also speak to a certain point about the occupational health, but in most settings, in acute care settings, we are not responsible for occupational health. And we have to be very, very cognizant not to overstep when we are in infection control role, because our presence on the floor is more evident in majority of situations in comparison to any other team members. Maybe the educators are probably spend the same amount of time on the units like we do, but occupational health is not somebody they see on a regular basis. So they may come and ask you questions, and be very careful not to overstep into that world of occupational health, unless this is the role that you also carry. I know in many smaller facilities, you will have a person be a director of care, be an infection control practitioner, and occupational health. So they do actually have multi roles. But when you're only in infection control, stick to that. Oh, so, Leonard, did you poke yourself when you were actually in front of them when you used this glucometer, or did you actually go behind somewhere so people don't see you poking yourself? All right, so when we are assessing our educational needs, what we need to do is to determine the needs and interests of the group, as I said before. So I mentioned this in a few occasions before. How do you do that? Is by finding the information from them. It could be, again, as a survey, could be communication, focus group, interest finder. You can even have a test. Like somebody earlier, I think it was Anika that mentioned, or Rebecca, that mentioned there is a survey, a quiz that you can develop with Kahoot. You can send that out and ask them about the questions, what they would like to learn. You can have one-on-one interviews with your frontline staff. But I also mentioned to you earlier is that review of the numbers that are coming off the units, whether that's a hand hygiene audits, or if you're looking into the rates of infection rates. So you obviously will see that there is something is not quite right and not adding up. So other way to look into the needs is also if you guys are sitting on the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, or you can ask them also to produce the reports to you. Occupational Health would also have reports on injuries at work, such as sharp injuries, or if you have somebody who is getting into a same kind of injury at work. More often you will find that with surgeons or with physicians where they're getting into sharp injuries, not so much with anyone else. In my experience anyway, is they just go through a certain routine, and you will have to address that and have a conversation in a way that is applicable to them. I had a physician. He has poked himself 3 times in a short period of time, and every time was rushing doing a life-saving procedures and would forget the needle on the blue pad next to the table. And he was one of those people that would never let anyone clean up after him, so he was always cleaning after his work. And every time during the cleanup procedure, he would poke himself. So we had to address that, and he was more embarrassed than anything that would happen to him. As I said, in quite a short period of time, he actually had 3 times been injured and put through a process of I'll talk about that in I think it's a week 8 where we are covering occupational health, where the injuries and prevention of injuries, but there's an entire process once a person has a needle stick injury, and it's not fun. Okay. So with your goals and objectives, we already touched base on that at the beginning, but what you want to make sure is what they call in the industry of teaching is the SMART objectives. So you want to make sure that they're specific, so they're specifically related to your learner. You can measure your goals and objectives. So how do you measure whether your objective was successful? Can you observe the success of your goals and objectives? Is it action-oriented? So I think anything that we do in IPAC is always action-oriented, but when you're putting it in the document, you want to make sure that you're using an active verb when you're describing it. And again, relevance. I think I have mentioned relevance many times before. It has to be relevant to your group, to your learners, and it has to be timely. So I mentioned this before, your C. diff and measles. If you have a C. diff outbreak, you want to make sure you're addressing the C. diff at that point. So we spoke about your learning environment. I am sure everyone is sitting in their homes or in their offices at this moment, but when you are organizing your formal education, it is critical that you make sure that you are in a position that you can be seen and heard, but also that your learners are in an environment that they're comfortable. So you're looking into the room temperatures, at the lighting, but you also want to make sure your room is tucked away from a lot of activity. So sometimes some of these rooms that are provided to us are next to elevators, or there is a maintenance office is right next to us, so there's a lot of other activities, or the delivery or the stores are right next to us, so there's a lot of activity with the cards. Sometimes you just hear simply the conversations in the hallways and things like that. So be aware of these distractions, because if anyone is laughing down that hallway and you're delivering statistics information session, they're more interested into that laughter down the hallway than your stance. When you're coming in with the equipment like your projectors and laptops, always count in your time to ensure that your equipment is actually fully functioning and properly working. But also, I would say, if you're not techie, have someone who can assist you. Like I have Leonard here. Leonard helps me with all the issues that people can't log in and they can't hear me or they can't hear themselves. Leonard is here to help us. So Leonard is my IT guy, although Leonard is not just IT guy, obviously. So also, make sure that you upload your presentation, try to project it, check if you have a remote, if you have a clicker, make sure all of that is functioning so you're not fiddling with the equipment once you start presenting. Well, fake news are the best articles, Leonard. Those are my favorite. So there's some pictures for you just in a way how you can set up the room. I would say your traditional classroom style is just a row of chairs and column of chairs. It goes into a square type of room. It can be more challenging to reach to your learner. Roundtables are really good for a smaller group. If you have a group of 50 people, there is no way you can put them in a round table. That said, roundtables are more for, you will see them more in use when you have like your joint health and safety committee or meetings, and there is some presentations coming up, educational sessions, or during your outbreak meetings. That's the most common setting that I've been around. And then your horseshoe or semicircle is actually really good setting because everyone can see each other, allows for interaction, but also you as a presenter can come near your audience and actually interact with them instead of being the sage on the stage away from everyone where people really can't interact with you. And then you can create a variation of different pods or doubles where you would enable creation of smaller groups or pairs. So if you have assignments or if you have any sort of activities where you can pair up people, so those are ideal settings. But then there's also those stadium or auditorium styles, where, like when you're in a university type of classroom. I don't find them very entertaining. They're very intimidating to me when I have to present in that size of environment. I'm more of a small group type of person where I can interact, I can read the faces, and I can understand if I'm hitting the point or am I putting my audience to sleep. And this is very challenging in a situation like this one in particular. So how do we enhance our learning experience? As I said, use as many different props. If you can bring anything around, that's ideal, that's perfect. But also when you are presenting, I always stand. I never sit, and this is another different setting for me, and I'm getting used to this. I usually stand and walk around, and I'm very, very articulate. I am showing things. I'm moving my hands. I'm moving my head. You probably see this too. I must be nauseating on a screen, but when I'm in person, it's a whole different experience for me, and I hope for my audience as well. And always make sure you repeat yourself. And it's not for the risk of being boring or repeating yourself in a manner that you're trying to drill something, but find different ways to say the same thing. So as you're going through, you remind them of the first part of introduction piece, but also repeat in a different fashion. The best is when you can actually have a conversation, which we are trying to do here through the chat, and it gets me completely distracted, and I apologize for that, but that's the entire idea of us actually having that interaction, and I can understand where are your needs, and you can tell me if I'm making sense or not making sense, and you would like me to clarify something, by all means. And then the role play, yes, so Leonard is playing at this point our IT support, but he tells me also he's a nuclear technician and Homer Simpson, and I know he has a lab background, so I think we can all relate to Leonard's story where I was hit with the frying pan over my head. So I guess that would be a good example of a role play. And real life examples is what I've been trying to bring you in and telling you how I'm teaching and how I do my own teachings. As I said before, it is very personal, and if you haven't done it in the past, you will grow into that role, and you will find yourself, you will find your own little comfort zone in a way you deliver something. But if you're not having fun, no one's having fun, I can tell you that. And then there is also, oh yes, body language is very important. I don't know if that's really a good thing, because I feel like I'm swaying all around this chair and moving around and showing things off, and I feel like I'm putting people to sleep or making them maybe nauseated and sick just because I'm constantly coming in and out. But other methods of teaching are your videos and slides, and you can use posters, you can use whiteboards. Good, Burnett, thank you. I do appreciate your responses. And so anything that you can use that is not just the voice is always really, really good to support your teachings. So this is how I imagine you now at this point. This is how I imagine everyone is just dozed off, nodding away. So if you tell them a good story and something that they can relate, it's always better than giving and sending any materials out or directing anyone to any website. People can find websites themselves, but if you can find this storytelling that people can relate, that's the way to work around your lecturing. The issue with lectures is that while you cover a lot of materials, it does get dull at some point. You can lose your audience. We should all go for ice cream, you're right. But it's not the best information. I think we already established that through Leonard's question. Quick quiz was asking how much do we retain. It's only 30%, and that's an average. Some people will not even retain that much information. And as I ask, there is also a bullet point here that says reserve time for questions and answers. So if there is any questions, please do ask, but I do appreciate a little chat session going on the side. And yes, I would really, really like to go for ice cream right now. So I think also what is important to mention here, as I find myself very often in a role of a stand-up comedian, and I like to crack up jokes, and I do like to show things that I think are funny. Always be cognizant that not everyone has the same sense of humor, and that what you may find humorous may not be funny to someone else on the other side. So be aware, be able to read people's faces as you're working through. You will learn as you get established in your own environment. You will learn who is your sidekick in the presentation, who is going to be your participant when you need someone to wear PPE and show it off and do your little model run. But be careful and be aware that not everyone will always respond in a way that you would want them to. It could be that they just have a bad day. It could be that something has happened to their patient. So be tuned with your audience. So are you saying most organizations prefer the lecture type of learning? Oh, yeah, so webinars and all sorts of, yes, of lectures, you're right. This is easy way, I think, and it does reach a wide audience. It usually is some sort of a webinar, about 45 minutes to an hour. They can pause at any time and come back, and then you have a certificate, and they also can have a quiz at the end of a session. The problem with that is, again, the availability and accessibility of computers. So you'll find that people who are normally not desk bound have a harder time to get to these computers. So you will find groups of people like, say, your housekeeping or food services or porters, people who are more mobile on the unit and they're moving around the facility, they have a harder time getting to their computers. At the same time, I also would make you aware and cognizant of the language barriers. Very often, staff that is not necessarily required to have a lot of English skill set is that may be challenging. The good things about the computer is that it's versatile, it's accessible. You can go on a unit, log in, and use it, and it does come with a lot of good. You can put links, you can put videos in, you can do all sorts of visual support around it, but it's a double-edged sword, I would say. If I have a choice, it's really not my go-to, but it's there. We use it usually for onboarding for IPAC or the annual refreshers, but it's not something that and people also cheat when they're doing these sessions. So if they usually put one computer on and it's running, and then it comes to the to the quiz, and then the rest of the group are going back and forth and trying to find the answers in the session, which is it's fine. I don't think everyone expects some sort of that type of event, but I think also as long as they're getting together and learning, I don't have too many issues with that, but computer-based training is definitely not my favorite. So games is something that we touched before. It's usually something that you can put a lot of people in, get a lot of activity, get them engaged. Like there is the Jeopardies of this world. One of the common games that we do distribute are the word puzzle. So you can put in all sorts of questions and they're finding the answers, and hand hygiene, but you can also create a question so they actually have to think about it. So you don't just say find hand hygiene in your word puzzle, but you can turn around like what are the 4 moments, moment 1, and so on, or what is the moment 1 of hand hygiene, and they would be looking for the answer in the puzzle. Other thing that we have done, and it was very, very successful in the past, was having a movie festival. So what we've done was create a movie festival for our hospital, and everybody could participate, and at the end was kind of like Oscars. So we had red carpet and we had actual Oscars handed over to the most voted, and so the topics that they would be recording videos on were provided by us. So we would say write a scenario about MRSA or PPE or C. diff and antibiotic resistance, and everyone has to create a video within the 5 minutes. So how they're going to record it, how they're going to edit, we don't ask. But with this particular event was really interesting because we had people from all departments participate, and they just enjoyed recording, and they were always very, very accurate in teaching, and you can use these materials later on to teach new hires, and we show them for the orientations, and they're fun because they really enjoy making them. So I don't know if you guys remember, what was that, girl? It's all about the base. I'm not going to sing because I just will spare you of that. But our pharmacy department made no C. diff video with regards to antibiotic resistance and C. diff control in the rhythm of All About That Bass song. So it's always something fun that you bring them in to participate, but then also you can use that tool later on to education. So I have here a question. Yeah. So Bernard, it's with regards to the cheating, I usually don't ask them to redo, because if I catch them that they are cheating, that just tells me that they're insecure in their knowledge and they're doubting what they know. So this would be really an opportunity for you to interact with them. Sometimes they ask me questions bluntly, asking me to provide them with an answer. And instead of saying, oh, it's a B or it's a C, I usually lead them to the answer. The idea of it is to teach them. And if they're not knowing the information, or some people just afraid they're going to fail, and then some of these quizzes that we create are so full of these technical kinks too. So if they answer, they can go back and fix it if they made a mistake. So I think it's it's important recognizing why are they doing what they're doing and supporting them through. And again, you want to build them up to be comfortable in their knowledge, and you want to enable them to find the answers. Bottom line is anyone can answer these questions. It's whether they're confident to carry that knowledge outside that quiz, right? So whether they know the actual ABC by heart because they've done it 5 years before in a row, or is it because they truly do understand. The idea of any sort of education is that they can translate it in practice. Jeopardy games are fun for sure. I find you can do a lot of good education with the Jeopardy games, but it also, as I said before, I like to give gifts, and then they're so excited about whether a cup of coffee, it's not even $2, $3, whatever it is, but they want to come back to. Whenever I teach, they always want to come back. Anika, I want to hear that influencer rap.
Sorry, Cornelia, I just want to say there's somebody that doesn't have their mic muted.
I think we're all muted now, besides me. And then I have also included here it's called an idea primer. I have put that in your reading materials. You can use that. It's from Public Health Ontario. And it takes you through, that's where I found the idea for my PPE pals as well. But one of the things that I've done is the PPE fashion show. So we would do kind of like a catwalk and then have a front row of audience put up the signs, and we use the isolation signs for droplet or airborne or contact, and then you're sending down your models down that catwalk wearing whatever you put them in. So if you put them in a gown with the N95 and a visor, so you want to see that your audience is lifting the right sign. So instead of like giving them the marks 9 and 10, they're getting the right signs for whatever PPE. And it's a lot of fun as well. Of course, the models are you always want to pick someone who wants to participate. So don't dress up poor soul who is just so uncomfortable even walking into the building, let alone walking down the catwalk. So just make sure you're able to read your audience when you're doing any of these activities. So yeah, to Leonard's point, we can always provide additional materials to help our learners to get where they need to be. The point is not to fail anyone. The point is to make sure that you guys are leaving with the knowledge and that you are better and improved and have something to carry on after the class, and you can use this in your day-to-day work. And if that can help you to get to your CIC, it's even better. But the idea of anything that we take in our life, as far as any education or lectures that we attend, conferences, it is to learn from it. And no, we will not retain 100% of it. I know I don't. And when people fail these exams, it's not a reflection of whether you are smart or not. It just tells you that there is too many competing priorities in a day, that they may be also some learning disabilities or language barriers. So being aware of that those could be also risks that are weighing down and bringing down your learners. And also some people just get completely frozen in front of a test because of their previous experiences. So the idea is to help them bypass that and find a better way to accommodate your learners, to show you where that knowledge is, if they do understand, don't understand, and if there is still a problem and there is still a gap, support them to fill that gap. So I'm just going to go back to our slides here. Mass training, I find that to be really a thing that is happening more and more with advancement of technology and the high-speed internet, but I have been using all sorts of platforms for training, even for my ICU unit, because I couldn't reach the entire group. This was, ICU has hundreds of staff, and it was impossible to reach them all with the current information with COVID. So we actually have established our ongoing Wednesdays meeting, and we would discuss topics, and people would send in questions that are relevant to them and they're interested to learn more, or there is something that came new as a document, so we use that platform. With regards to the mass training, that's your wide-scale institution education, so I think we mentioned that before. We've done these town halls as well, where thousands of our staff call in, and we have ID physician present and occupational health there and lab. So if there is anything that is changing and it does impact the day-to-day work and operation of the frontline staff, so we would do these what we call them town halls. And at the beginning of COVID outbreak, we were doing them every 2 weeks, and then we kind of started distributing them and reduce the frequency as there was really no more appetite as COVID became more of a thing that everyone knew about. So train the trainer is, I would say, is one of your opportunities to use as a tool. However, be very careful with that. I had a role where my primary job was to train the trainers, and oh boy, yeah. So it has a risk of becoming this game of broken telephones, where you think you have said something or you have trained your trainer, and then by the time they have trained 10, and out of those 10 they trained other 10, the original message that you have delivered, it does change. So be aware of that. I've been also in a situation where I had asked one of my teams who has delivered the training to the PSWs who were cleaning the operating rooms between the two surgeries. And I've learned that the person who trained the original trainer was retired for 10 years. So, and that information just kind of continues traveling from one person to the other. It can work, but you just have to be sure that you are having a good handle and double checking and coming back to your trainers to verify that it's still valid information and that they're still following the agreed information, the information you agreed upon. The other important part to it is any changes that do happen. So say if you change the product, and now the actual training scenario is no longer applicable, you have to change. Yes, I know, 10 years is a lot. The thing is that once you train the trainers, they become themselves the trainers, and they also hold a responsibility to remain current and keep up and make sure they are the ones who are still maintaining that knowledge. That responsibility shouldn't be sitting just with you either. I think this is a really good point that Leonard is bringing up. If you guys can all take a look, I think it is critical actually tapping into resources that you have in your group. So that's a good point. I do like when I have groups of people, I like to put different backgrounds, different educational backgrounds together. So I would put a housekeeper, a nurse, porter. So I put them all together and they learn from one another. So there's things that nurses don't know about cleaning, and nurses and PSWs have a responsibility to clean equipment after each use. So if you put them together into these training sessions and they can learn from one another, it's amazing. That just takes off a lot of your responsibilities to teach. But always make sure you're monitoring this exchange of information, because you want to make sure that you still know what is being discussed and that you can adjust the information if needs to be adjusted. All right. So role play or reenactment, so that's a really good game that I really like to play. I usually would come on a unit and give them responsibilities in say, so Leonard would be the patient. He has new onset of diarrhea. This morning he had 8 bouts of diarrhea. And he's now acting out, of course, for all of us, the events. And then I would pull out a housekeeper and have her to be a nurse and see how she's going to manage this. And then the nurses who would be in the role of porters, and just give them different roles to see how are they acting out and how are they perceiving other people's roles. That kind of helps also to identify also the gaps in knowledge between your different portfolios. Sometimes it can fire back, so be careful with that as well. Sometimes they will say, oh, so-and-so never cleans, and they will just leave the patient in all the feces, or they will just take them to shower and forget about the patient. So be very careful about these events, because it can fire back, but also be prepared to control the situation and make light of it. So with the case studies, I think this is what we use quite frequently in educational styles. You yourself will actually you will be receiving some of these, and this will actually show us how well do you perceive the information that I have shown and shared with you, but also how well can you apply. So it will strengthen your analytical skills, will teach you also to critically review particular events, but also in a group where I will put you together, you will have that interaction and you will see different ways to communicate, different styles, and it's going to be interesting. I will just tell you that. Because we end up as IPAC, we live in a very isolated world, especially in smaller teams. You find yourself very often isolated. So when we start working in these groups, you'll realize that your problems are not just your problems. The entire IPAC world has exactly the same problems. So here is one of the case studies. So I'm going to read it to you and you guys can answer. A 24-year-old female presents to ER with flu-like symptoms, including fever, malaise, dry cough, and shortness of breath. Which of the symptoms increase the risk of spreading the infection of the staff or the other patients? What types of personal equipment would you recommend to the staff providing direct care? What type of PPE would you recommend for contact with ill patients, and what type of teaching or strategies would you implement with patient, staff, and prevent further spread? So let's start with the answer with the question 1. What are the symptoms that increase the risk of spreading the infection to the staff and other patients? Perfect. Leonard is answering. I'm so happy I didn't put you to sleep. You're all answering. Oh, okay. So, very good. Very good. All right. So what kind of equipment, what type of personal protective equipment would you recommend for the staff providing direct care to this patient to wear? So somebody actually said up there, okay, so Sue says droplet contact precautions. So that would be the precautions we would initiate on admission. And for the droplet contact precautions, what you need to wear is eye protection, face mask, gowns, and gloves. So this would be for anyone who is in direct contact with this patient. So anyone who is coming in, taking vital signs, or taking down any sort of demographic information, anything like that. Very good. Now, if we were to observe another staff member, so say a housekeeping staff that is cleaning around the nursing station, so that would be staff that does not have direct contact with this patient, what would you recommend for them to wear? That's become quite prevalent with COVID now, right? Everyone's wearing masks and facial protection and eye protection rather. Very good. So Anika, with regards to masks and goggles and to anyone else who's responded that we should be wearing a mask or eye shield. So this is a standard nowadays with COVID. In the past, I would say before COVID time, you wouldn't be wearing any of that PPE. You would, so for housekeeping staff, cleaning the nursing station, they would be wearing gloves to, because they're in contact with the chemicals. And that was the only reason why they were wearing the gloves. But nowadays, ever since COVID has entered and is center scene, everyone is wearing masks and eye protection 24 hours while we are in healthcare settings, unless we are eating or drinking and we have to take it off. Very good. Okay, so I would ask you a question. So what kind of teaching would you provide to the patient in this instance? Okay, so this is to the staff, yeah? Mm-hmm. Very good. Yes, very good. Yes. So those are all good questions. I would also include the question to you, what about the families? Very good. So with regards to the staff, how would you teach this? How would you show, them? Would you tell them? How would you how demonstration? Yes, so demonstration is one way, but also when you're demonstrating, you also want them to demonstrate right back to you. The other way that I have been using, and I find it's effective when you have a person put PPE on and you ask their colleagues to assess and would they change anything to advise. So that way the colleagues are involved as well, but also gives you an opportunity to someone else to correct, so you're not always the bad guy. Very good. All right, so let's move to the next. So with mentoring programs, I don't know if you guys have any mentors that are taking you through this course. Probably would be wise idea to have a mentor. I think it's one of the most beneficial relationships that you will be in, whether you are the mentor or you are the mentee. It can be formal, it can be organized through IPAC Canada or any of your chapters if you are members. Yes, we're not. Yes, we can. Let me just finish the mentoring and then we can have a 5-minute break for sure. And then you can do also a volunteering mentoring program. I always have been involved in some kind of mentoring program, whether I was mentored or I am mentoring. So your mentors can be also kind of nominated. It becomes a little bit more of a challenge if someone is voluntold to mentor someone, but it can be done. The best is when that relationship is mutual and there is interest from both parties to participate. So it is a long-term relationship and long-term partnership. I find that I still go back to all my mentors with the questions, and I'm very comfortable reaching back to them. Sometimes you just outgrow these relationships. But also for my mentees, I find sometimes they do, once we reach the goal that we have, whether that's a job hunting or that's getting certification here in Canada and getting their foot into the infection control jobs, some of them do reach less. But I would say with all of my mentees, I'm in continuous contact. And it's the biggest privilege that one of us can be presented with is being asked to mentor someone. I find it to be the biggest privilege and honor for me when someone asks me to take them and join them on their journey to achieve their goal. So I think that's something that we always have to keep in mind. All right, so I'm going to give you guys a 5-minute break and then we can come back. I know it's a lot of dry information. I apologize, but we will get through this, okay? So 5 minutes, back at 8:45. We're back.
Yes, we are.
Perfect. It was a quick break. So, okay, so we finished with mentoring programs here, this slide, and then we are going to move now to our next slide. Very good. Thank you all for coming back. So simulation. Simulation is actually a really good way of engaging people. So one of the most common simulations that I have used was the patient room. So you would set up the patient room in such a fashion that does have some unwanted setups, or there is, I would say, errors. So if you have a patient inside that is supposed to be on contact precautions, you leave a droplet contact sign at the door. Also, with regards to the PPE, so the patient that's set in the room or your actors that are in the room that are presenting the nurses also are wearing wrong or not fitting PPE, or the equipment that's left in the room, or anything that will start a conversation. I will tell you an example that we have done was for the accreditation. We made an escape room. So we set up a room and we brought in teams. So we slotted for days different teams, and teams had to be from build up from different representatives. So we would have a pharmacy and a nurse and PSW from a different unit than a nurse and a housekeeper and a porter. So we would building different teams that would give them that will give them equal strength in recognizing the problems. And then, of course, there were times. So who had the quickest time in escaping the room, finding the answers, was the winner. So those are the things that you can use as a simulation. So it is time consuming. It's probably not the best time to do it now in the COVID situation, but it's something to think about. So you can do, so I have here a picture for you. This was one of our rooms that we set up, and you can see there in the corner there is a sharps container that's sitting right above the patient's head. You don't want that to be there. There's blood on the floor. There's gloves that are sitting on the rails. There is chair used for PPE. So those are all the things that you would want to point as those are not the events that you would want to actually take place in real life. And then anyone who scores would, of course, be a winner. So you always want to give them something in return, not just being a winner, but you also want to give them some small award, anything that you can give them to take back and have good memories. And you can also use that and put on your IPAC webpage if you have that in your hospital, or if you have that in your long-term care facilities. So use some of these learning opportunities as celebrations for you and your team as well. So those are the simulations. I hope that that made sense. And then educational cards are also a tool you can use. I find they turn out to be can be quite messy and really difficult to control information because you leave these cards, but they're good in terms for education for people who are not on the unit when you are there, or if they were busy at the time when you came about. So you can see I have used here plates, petri dishes that we use for bacterial growth. You can use pamphlets. You can leave different types of PPE that is available to them to use, or different type of cleaning supplies, so whether there is a sporocidal or you have different types of cleaners that you use and employ when you need the C. diff clean and that sort of a thing. So you can leave that information behind and they can come around and read at their own leisure when they have more time. So this picture is not really showing here well, but we had also the stool samples. So the stool samples that I made here are not real, I assure you of that. So we used chocolate, different types of chocolate, to create and recreate different types of stool consistency in line with Bristol chart. So of course, I had O. Henry chocolate. I had the raisin-covered chocolate, chocolate-covered raisins that, of course, would show to them what they can use to gauge what is to be sent for C. diff. Because I find with diarrheas, I find it's very difficult to determine what is a valid specimen to send. So yes, I actually made these stool samples with my friend's 8-year-old, and he went back to school the following day and asked what was he doing last evening, and he said, I made poo. I made poo, to which his teacher said, that's not exactly how we say it, but thanks for sharing. But yeah, so those are some of the examples you can use. This is, again, it depends exactly on, it depends completely on the environment where you are, and depends on what is applicable and how you delivering these messages and what is the target, what is it you want to achieve. So Leonard is telling us he only does on real stool samples here. So with regards to the teaching styles, there is different types of teaching: expert and formal authority, demonstrator, facilitator, delegator. So with the experts, I do expect all of us in ICP to be experts in our own realm of knowledge, and we do possess that vast knowledge that everyone is looking for. But it's also, how do you prepare yourself? So sometimes I find, as I'm going through this course, I became rusty in certain areas because simply we are not using them day to day, or I'm not using them in my role. But if you come across as know-it-all and a little bit on a distant side, it can be intimidating to your frontline learners. So I prefer stepping down a notch from that academic delivery, because I find engaging frontline staff does more benefit to me and to them than speaking in a very technical terms, in very technical language. It just does not, I don't find it very helpful. That said, there is time and place. If you are presenting and at a conference and you are representing your facility and you're representing your team, this is where you want to pull that expert hat and pull that hat on and show them all off how amazing you are. But I would say for us in day-to-day, probably the most benefit is demonstrator personality, where we actually coach them and show them and encourage them to carry the knowledge. You also could be a facilitator, where we are encouraging them to share their knowledge, and that's also a good method for sure. All right, so this is us in the role of demonstrator. This dog is my inner personality. That's how I see myself. Every day I wake up, that's what I think I look. I don't know if you guys see any resemblance, but that's how I see myself. And the second picture is me actually, is me showing off the glow germ. So someone mentioned that that in the past you guys also use these. And then in the yellow is one of my colleagues wearing his Ebola suit. I think that's what Leonard pulled off to one of his staff. So those little Tyvek suits were my favorite because everyone looked so cute in them. Everyone looked like a little duckling. We're lucky we didn't have to pull them out, actually, to have any interaction with our patients. So at the end, you come to evaluation and assessment, and you want to make sure you do assess how is your teaching progressing, where are you within your lectures, or where are you within on your long term. So usually we would be looking into assessing and evaluating how far has our learner come. Also, you want to focus more on your teacher activity or student activity. So it's what is that, how you are assessing yourself and your learners. With evaluation, you're looking more on the student performance. So when you're looking into assessment, you're observing them, what they're doing and how are they doing versus the performance. And then you can use critiques, focus groups, interviews, surveys, where for evaluations you're using those tests and quizzes. So that's when you get more of a measurable feedback. And for either one of them, you definitely want to improve their teaching and learning process. And then for the evaluation, this is used for ranking and assigning a number to how well has someone performed. And so that's pretty much the difference between those two. I think from our perspective in benefiting as ICPs, you want to complete the assessments and get understanding where your learners are through the process. where when you're in a course, you want to get the mark. Of course, I want to know how well you're doing, but to pass the course, there's certain expectations where when you're training on the units, you're not marking your colleagues. So feedback, I think we discussed this a little bit through our class today, but what is really, really important to keep in mind when you're providing feedback. Feedback is beneficial if provided from the right place. So if you are providing a feedback with intent to get what you want out of it, it's not beneficial to your learner. So what I'm trying to say here is always look at the positive feedback first. You want to highlight also not so much the negative, but the critique, what is missing, and address, of course, what is amiss, and always finish with the positive. So I'm thinking, start always with you're doing so well with A, B, or C. And then I always ask them, I'd rather ask a question, how do they think they're doing, versus me telling them you're doing horribly in whatever it is that I observe, let's say hand hygiene or PPE doffing. So ask them how do they feel about some of these trainings and what did you provide in the past? How do they feel with that knowledge now? And always finish with a positive. One of the things I will tell you is never put your colleagues on a spot in public. You are professional. You come with pride to work, so they do. Everyone else comes, wakes up in the morning and thinks we are going to conquer the world. Today is going to be the day, and something happens. We just are humans. We make mistakes. We are stressed, horrible traffic. Kids were running around. The husband didn't do the dishes. The garbage didn't get taken out, and everything gets in imbalance in the morning. So when something is not right, always do that in a private conversation, and it will be a huge payback to you because people will respect you more for that. And anytime you see even the smallest event that is right, praise in public. I shout from the rooftops. I send emails to the managers, to the director level. I observed Angela is doing amazing today. I saw her doing her hand hygiene, and then she followed with PPE technique, and I saw her teach another colleague, or she taught that student. So I would write those little emails of praise and share that to their supervisors, to their managers, and I never go around reporting people unless it's really, 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 really critical and we have run out of all ideas how to address the problem. Yes, that's called the poop sandwich. You're right. When you start with positive, negative, and finish with positive, it's called the poop sandwich. You got it. Yes, you have to be tactful. Absolutely. And I always find some of these, you have to also be aware of your surroundings. And if you see that there is a nurse and she is helping a patient and I don't know, a mask fell off or a gown is not properly tied, that's not the moment to approach this problem. You don't want to embarrass that nurse in front of their patients because they are supposed to maintain that level of their own expertise in the eyes of the patients as well, but also they're seen as kind and caring, so we don't want to interrupt that interaction as well. And also you are risking for any mistakes to happen during the care because they get distracted, they worry about things. So if things are not right, if you can't address it in a more subtle way or help and make sure that does not have negative consequences, leave it. Oh, yes. Yeah. So you don't do this. Yes, Leonard, you're right. Yeah. Okay. So we are getting into a little bit of kind of coming towards the end of our session tonight. So one of the methods when you're teaching, it's called a positive deviance. I'm sure you guys have heard about it. It's recognizing those individuals that are exemplary in a way, that stand out from a crowd. So if you have a same group of people that are provided with the same, they're in the same setting, they're provided with same set of information, they have exactly, they're all same, and then you see that one of your people, one of your colleagues is leading by change. So those are the ones, those are your early adopters. They're the ones who find solutions thinking out of the box. So sometimes when you are in a situation that just doesn't seem like there is an end to a problem, you find these thinkers that have a different thought process or see things a little bit differently. Sometimes they're new to the group as well, and it's just what we refer to a fresh set of eyes, like you, out of the box, Leonard. But it's the ones that are actually making that difference. So you want to support that change, and that's what's called positive deviance. So they're usually your frontline staff. They already are a part of your team, but sometimes something happens that they just see the light at the end of a tunnel and they change. So I will tell you, one of these problem-solving methodologies that I like to use, and they don't always work, is TRIZ. So what I would do, I had a unit that was on outbreak. We had a C. diff outbreak it was raging for 8 months, and we couldn't find a problem. Actually a problem. The problem was C. diff, but we didn't know what is actually bringing this continuous transmission. And everything we tried was really getting to a point that everyone was tired, and we are constantly in an outbreak, and it's more or less of the same measures all around all the time. And I tried something different with them. So I asked them one day to work with me, which was a little bit different than in an ask. So I asked them to think about the steps that they would complete to give everybody on the unit, including all the patients, all the staff, the managers, even the visitors, and even us that are not regular staff on the unit, but just come to occasionally or spend an hour or 2 hours or half an hour on the unit. We all are supposed to get C. diff out of the visit to the unit. At first they were thinking I'm crazy, of course, but then so I left a big flipboard on their unit and little sticky notes and highlighters, and it kind of started off very shy, but then we kind of got into these ideas that some of them are so outrageous, and of course no one would do that. Never clean the hands, or never clean any of the equipment, or don't ever clean your patients, don't give them antibiotics, don't treat them, don't do this and do that. So this is when, as I said, some of these things were completely outrageous. And then the second day, once we got to a list of all these outrageous statements listed on this whiteboard, on a white sheet of paper rather, I asked them to transfer that information to the fresh sheet to say what of these outrageous listed situations or identified that we actually on occasion do. So which are the ones that do happen? As much as we hate to admit it, how frequently does it happen that we do miss a hand hygiene? It's not every time, but do we miss it? So some of them have no hand hygiene sinks, but then there was a discussion around broken hand hygiene sinks, or stool management was another big issue. So not that we would leave our patients sitting in a brief filled with diarrhea, but there was a component that actually discovered and opened a door for discussion in a way that we would never come up to talk in a way we had our typical discussions. So tell me, what's the problem? So this, how are we cleaning our hands? Of course we are cleaning hands. Are we cleaning equipment? Of course. But once we started dissecting it from the kind of backwards assessment and asking them to give everyone C. diff, we actually identified a lot of gaps that I wasn't aware as their IPAC practitioner. Their manager wasn't aware of a lot of problems that there were just nurses just deal with that. So we used that to draw and created a list of issues that were repetitively occurring on the unit. Like they wouldn't have running water in one of the private rooms on very, very common occasion because something was wrong with the plumbing, or we didn't have macerators and the stool was carried in those bedpans from one end to the other end of the unit because it was an older hospital. So we used that information and figured out that we needed better stool management. So those were some of the ideas of how do you identify different methods of nailing the problem and finding the root cause of your problems and then work from there. I will tell you, it doesn't work all the time. They have to be in a state that they are willing to work with you on that, and you have to have a very solid way to ask the questions, but also to recognize and develop further from what they put in the first sheet once they're transferring. And then the final step of the TRIZ is asking them, what can you, out of all these things, take to be your responsibility and make sure you are taking care of that? So for all of them, it was easy to say, well, I can clean my hands, of course, or of course, I can always make sure that my patient's stool is taken away from the room and in a timely manner. So those are the things that we had discussed and that helped actually nail and identify the problems that originated from this particular C. diff outbreak and identify where the problems are. Okay. So the next thing is creating your networking maps, and it is really discussion more about identifying your individuals and who are your people that are not just a part of your team. So are you looking into expanding your team and reaching out to other teams like pharmacy and lab and housekeeping, and also thinking outside of your facility. So creating your own networks where you are exchanging information with other ICPs, or it could be also nurses from the other hospitals that you're in touch with, just to see how are you gauging and where are you in relation to the other surrounding facilities. Also thinking about how can you eliminate some of these barriers. I find every time you step out of your office and you have an opportunity to talk to your colleagues that are not working under the same roof with you, that you discover that there is other ways to find solutions to problems, but also I find for me is always very much rewarding to find out that we are all in the same boat, although we are not in the same building. So we are all fighting exactly the same problems day in and day out, and someone else might have actually a different view and a different resolution to a problem. So when you're looking into your like your MRSA prevention, and you're looking into any of the initiatives that are put in place, what you always want to look at is what happens before that positive deviance. So you want to make sure you measure your numbers of MRSA, and then once you implement whatever that one individual has found a solution for you, you can implement those recommendations, and then again measure whether that's actually had a positive outcome. So that's pretty much with how that works with your networks, and how do you create your kind of almost like your little circle of friends at work, I would say, but also looking into your innovations. So also learning about what are the ideas that people have used and that worked for fighting whatever. It could be MRSA, it could be C. diff, and may work on you. So we say don't reinvent the wheel, right? So it's the same thing. It may be something that you can apply in your own facility. So, okay. So Leonard is right. There is always a different, more than one way to accomplish a task. So you may have a certain approach, and that's where you are comfortable, and we are creatures of habit, we are humans. You kind of tend to go back to the same thing. The thing is, if it's not working, we should be looking into different solutions. Right. So, and then when you're looking into your social networks and how are you measuring your analysis, you're always looking at awareness, right? So what it means actually in some understanding terms that is more usable to your day-to-day is what is actually happening in your facility, and how well is the information that you're sharing is traveling through. Are the measures that you put in place are actually working, and is it changing anything? Is it just kind of an idea, or is it becoming an actual change? And that's what you want. You want, if you're having a high number of infections on your unit or high number of cases that are colonized with MRSA, you want to change some of these practices to reduce that. You're always looking into these people who are I call them informal leaders, connectors. They're the ones who will carry your message, and they're connecting with other people. But at the same time, your connector can be someone who will say, I actually don't know the answer, but I think I have a colleague that works at another facility. They know how to do this, or they've dealt with this. I'm going to put you in touch with so-and-so. They had this experience with MRSA, and they were successful. So those are the people you're looking for. Don't ever be shy. I would say that. Hear what other people have to say. You may not like it. You may not find it beneficial at this time, but it is important that you create these relationships and you create your own network that you are comfortable in, and that you are constantly exchanging information. Okay. So, I'm going to ask you just a few questions here before we wrap up. So there is three major domains in the learning process. There's cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. In the affective learning domain, the individual uses recall, application, and analytical skills in learning, demonstrates new skills or new ways of acting and doing, embraces new attitudes, values, and beliefs in the learning process, and may demonstrate conflict or resistance on the learning. What do you think the right answer is here? Very good. Yes, so you want, when you're teaching and when you're sharing the knowledge through the process where we learn that people go through this cognitive, affective, or psychomotor processes, the end is that you want them to embrace the new attitudes. You want them to change to whatever it is that you're teaching. So if you're implementing and sharing any knowledge with regards to reduction of, say, MRSA colonizations, your end goal is to change the way they practice, but you also want to share your values where you can say, so some of these values may not be relevant to the frontline staff as they are to us. So you have to find a way to make it more of interest to them. So when we say what is in it for me, why am I doing this? Why am I working and changing everything you're asking me for? So how do you make this more relevant to them and valuable? So all of our frontline staff pick their jobs because they care for their patients. So if you turn it around that just because we want to reduce the number of infections per month or per year or whatever it is that we are using the rate, that may not resonate. But if you turn it around and say you don't want your patient to leave with something that they didn't come with, that makes a bigger difference for them. And understanding that they are the ones who can actually improve the outcomes of our patients, and they are the force, truly. We can only see the numbers in the end, but how do we making them change? Hope that helped. Okay, so let's go to the next question. The first step in preparation of your educational program is to do what? Identify the budgetary resources for educational program. B, assessing the educational needs of the learning population. C, investigating media projection equipment available and incorporating the evaluation process of the preparation strategies. I think I got that across very strongly. Very good. Okay. So as an ICP, there's more answers coming. Okay, so we're going to move to the next question, question 3. As an ICP, you recognize that your audience is an adult learner. So what is important and why? So because adults generally prefer practical rather than academic knowledge, and they tend to learn what they can use. B, may have limited attention spans due to multitask management. C, may not provide honest feedback unless encouraged to do so. And D, may feel future education is unnecessary once they're in a job or a position of comfort. Deep, I think that's a very honest answer. No more education. I'm done. I got my job. The truth is, we actually want to proceed with education, right? So what you want to make sure is that you grow in your role and that you as a practitioner you serve as a resource. So I would say don't stop learning once you get to the job or the position. But as adult learners, what is really important for us is to recognize the practical rather than academic knowledge. So when you're an adult learner, we have a little bit of a different approach to studying, right? So they learn from what they do and how they practice. So your answer for this question is A. Yes, no, I know. I am joking with you, Deep. It is sometimes we do somewhat suffocate our frontline staff and not really giving them opportunity to grow. I find sometimes people feel stuck in their roles too, and they don't see an opportunity for growth. But I think with our jobs and our roles, we always can open some of these doors for them to expand their knowledge and apply their knowledge in a different way, I would say. Okay. So another question, which of the following is correctly written instructional objective? No, you're right, Leonard. It is. We get stuck in our own little world. You're right. So let me finish the question. Which of the following is correctly written instructional objective? After completion of the program, the employee will be able to list about 90% accuracy 5 infection control resources in the hospital. After completion of the program, the employee will understand why infection control is important, and to provide information so the employee will feel more secure in the hospital environment, and D, to provide information that will enable the employee to use the infection control manual. Very good. Yes, so we want to make sure that after the completion of the program, that the employee will understand and list actually with accuracy the understanding of infection control and understanding the importance of the program. Okay, so I have 2 more questions and then we are done for tonight. When designing an isolation in service for your housekeeping services, which of the following teaching strategies is the best? A lecture on the use of protective barriers while performing tasks. B, simulation of the proper use of protective barriers. A case study of proper cleaning of patient's room. And D, use the example of the housekeeper not wearing gloves when cleaning the patient room during a lecture to the department. Yeah, so we all agree that this is the best ways to provide a simulation on how to wear the PPE, right? So we teach them, and D is a really not a good answer for so many reasons. We don't want to point out at anyone while they're doing their job. We don't want to embarrass anyone while they're doing their job. And also puts us in a bad situation and sheds a really negative light on us as an individual, but also on our role and our departments. All right, so the last question of the night is, as a part of program on wound care, you have the participants to demonstrate how to properly apply an abdominal dressing. In which of the learning domains this exercise reflects change? Cognitive, affective, psychomotor, or objective? Well, I'm glad you all listened to me. Very good. So I hope that you guys had enjoyed this lecture, and I hope that you have had an opportunity to hear something you haven't heard before, and I hope that you will be coming back. I would like to hear from you how did you like the class. Thanks, Rebecca. And if there's anything that I can do to make it better for you and improve this, I know it's very challenging sitting behind the screen for so long. I feel like we need more breaks maybe to have in between and give you an opportunity to just refresh. So so the link for the textbooks, that there is no textbook for this course, if that's what you're asking. I have provided recommendation for some of the books that I use in my day-to-day work, but I also will tell you for your CIC certification, you will need your APIC textbook. Anika and I had a conversation today. There is no more printed textbook for APAC. There is only online access. So you can get that as an individual access, or if you're working in a facility that is willing to purchase that for you, they can buy access for more than one person. And so you can do that. And when I spoke today with APIC, they also said, just like we all know, you can save this as PDF and you can print them. They're not as pretty as a book, of course, if you are more of a tactile person and you do like to have books. I know I like my books. So that's what I would say. Go and look at your red book, look at your Hayman's Communicable Diseases Manual and IPAC text. There was no discussion for this week, but there is a discussion. It's on the same page where you access the class and where is this presentation. I have left you with one paper and a couple other links to take a look, and I would like you to talk about the role of an infection control practitioner. How do you see yourself in that role? So there's a chat there and you can discuss there. So good question with regards to the CIC. So we, the CIC course is American-based course. It is organized by CBIC. It is predominantly driven by American standards. That said, when you're writing it in Canada, they do take that in consideration, and there is some differences between Canadian practice and United States practice in terms of infection control, so they do take that in consideration. And yes, this course is in line to prepare you for CIC exam. It is not to give you a CIC certification. You will not be certified automatically after this course. To get, I actually have information in one of our next conversations with regards to your course, how to get it, where to get it, what do you need to get it. Thank you, Sharon. So yeah, so those are the materials that I would like. So you can discuss all the way until next Thursday. Come and visit at your own time. There's no pressure on that. I just want to hear your thoughts and to see how you actually working through the materials that we are working, because I want to be able to gauge how to support you. So I will be posting immediately before the class the materials. I just don't want you to be overwhelmed and taking information too far ahead. I'd like you to go back and revisit what we did today, and then you can digest this information for next week, and we'll start fresh next Friday. Any other questions?
I have a question. It's Aisha. Because I am in Calgary and I thought that the class will start 6:30 according to Calgary time, but they forgot to write in the email that it's according to Toronto time, so I do apologize for that I was late today.
It's okay, Aisha. We had another of our students also. She's in Ontario and she came in on early because she thought it's at 3:30, because some of the earlier communication came out in line with Alberta time. And so just so we are clear, the 6:30 is Ontario time, Toronto time, and then however that time zone works.
4:30 is Calgary time, and then tomorrow it's 10:30 in Toronto, so it means 8:30 in Calgary then.
So tomorrow there is no class, so just so we are clear, please don't sign up for tomorrow. There is no class. We covered everything I wanted for this particular session tonight. I have booked some of our Saturdays for the lectures that are upcoming, and they're a little bit more heavier in information, and I'd rather have it broken into 2 days than overwhelm you and drain you with that information. So I have booked your Saturdays, but tomorrow is no class.
Thank you.
No problem.
Cornelia, sorry, just a quick question as well. I did try to ask you in the chat, but I'm just wondering, like, for the discussion that's due next week, I guess Thursday, Is there a specific question? Because when I'm going to Unit 2, it just says no, like no items to show. Like it doesn't display anything. Like I just want to know where am I supposed to be writing my discussion question or scenario or whatever it is, and what is it?
Okay, so if you look back into chat, Sharon actually has shared the information that I sent in your chat. I will ask also Leonard if he can direct us back into the discussion session through email and send you the links. But we are not discussing from today till Thursday, we're not discussing session 2. We are discussing this topic. So there is, I have left you with a paper to read. It's Understanding Infection Control Professionals, Educational Practices. There is more than meets the eye. So I would like you to read that paper. I provided you with a link there. And then I'd like to hear about what are your takes on the education role of IPAC practitioners. And then I left you with a video, of course, nothing too exciting about the video, so just take a look at that. And then there's also the idea primer that gives you some ideas on how to make more engaging sessions for your learners. But the only thing that I would have any follow-up is reading that paper and then have a discussion with your group, and it's within that chat box there.
Thank you.
I know this time is very confusing because we are all over Canada. We have somebody from Saskatchewan, we have somebody from British Columbia, so we just have to make sure that's clear, because I think we all forget that we live in how many time zones? 5, 6, 7? So yeah.
So next time we are going to see each other on Friday or Thursday.
Next Friday, we are going to see each other. I will monitor your conversation over this next week and take a look at just to see how you guys chatting there, what's happening. I'm not expecting any essays, just to have a heart-to-heart discussion to one another. Don't worry about your spell checks and things like that. It's not something that we are looking in terms of accuracy of writing or anything. I just want to hear your thoughts. No. So I'm going to ask Leonard if he can send us another email with where to find us. But if you go back to your dashboard, and then I guess I have to log in again, but if you go back to your dashboard and you find the under IPAC, your course, and then you go into week 1, unit 1, and there is looks like a little bubble. So where did you access the virtual class? It's right below. There is the chat box, so you can actually discuss in there.
Sorry, just to be clear, I just want to know, so you're saying that for the discussion for next week, we're supposed to do it under Unit 1, or is there going to be another little bubble under Unit 2? Because under Unit 2, there isn't anything right now.
No, the Unit 2 is locked until Friday, so I will open Unit 2 on Friday. And we'll start.
Okay, so we need to post under Unit 1 then, basically.
That is correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, so any other questions? Thanks so much, Leonard.
Thank you both, Cornelia and Leonard. I hope you guys have a good weekend, long weekend.
Yes,
yeah, my pleasure,
enjoy.
guys. And Cornelia, I hope I didn't take the spotlight away from you too much.
Never, Leonard. We're so happy to have you.
Leonard, you kept us engaged.
Yeah, it's just, teaching is one of my passions, and so I know of all these weird and different techniques in that, to educate not only children but also adults as well. So, if you guys ever need other help in that regard, in regard to teaching a certain curriculum or whatever, just throw me a line, and and I can help you out with some pretty neat suggestions in that. So
Thank you so much.
Is there any other questions before we part ways?
We're good.
Okay. So do send me any emails, or if you have any questions, or if you need any more information, anything that you would like to hear from me, by all means, do feel free to connect with me.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Have a good night.
You too. Enjoy
Bye.
the weather.
okay, have a good weekend, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.